Hey there, welcome back to the show. This is the Great Outdoors Photography Podcast, episode 162. There, I'm your host, Brent Bergherm. It's great to have you back. Thank you so much for joining me here, both on YouTube and in audio-only land, where we're going to be taking a look at what I call design and creativity in photography. I'm thrilled to have you here because what I want to do is take you through this process, take you through this idea of what is, I guess I can call it a beginner's approach or beginner's understanding to the overall approach that I've developed for how I approach an image, what I think about, what I go through, and we're going to get into some really nitty-gritty stuff here. But here's what it really boils down to. It boils down to a basic, I guess, understanding, a basic level, a basic viewpoint that says, I want to be able to help you tap into your creativity and to be able to pull it out. We've got a whole season of photography coming up here in 2024, and I would just love to get us on the right foot, to get us started on the right journey, the right path to expressing our creativity and going deeper, going wider, going further with our photography than hopefully we've ever gone before. And that is where, again, the idea of creativity, this notion of drawing that out. I'm going to say this a few times, I'm sure, in this session, and that is, I don't believe I teach you to be creative. I teach you how to draw out your creativity. This is something that I guess we can say I've discovered, I've understood over the course. I've been teaching graphic design for 16 years now, a little more than 16 years now. And when I first started, boy howdy, things were rough. But right around year 7, year 8, year 9, somewhere in there, why did it take so long? It is what it is. But I really started to fully articulate and fully understand, my job is really about learning people, learning who they are, how they operate, and helping them to pull out that creative side, that creative impetus, that creative identity that we all have. I believe each and every one of us has a unique creative voice, and that it is given to us by God Himself, and that we are able to pull that out, and we are able to communicate that. We're able to share that with others, in this case, through our photography. So my objective today, I want to introduce you to the course a little bit, but really, I just want to help you understand how to get this all started. That's what it's really all about, getting it started. And the ideal here is I like to focus on design principles, not rules. When you focus on standard design principles, you are opening yourself up to a completely different idea of what is your starting point, what is important in your scene, what is the way that you take that first step. So photography rules can definitely be limiting. That's my initial MO. That's my initial belief, I guess we can call it, to get the conversation started. But these design principles, that introduces a new language for us, that introduces a new way of understanding and a new starting point. And it's not anywhere near as limiting as these design rules can be or are, quite frankly. So the rules are made to be broken is a wonderful cliche. So why spend so much time trying to adhere to them? I have said it certainly myself. Learn the rules, but then you can break the rules. Certainly that notion makes sense. But what if we were to even just say, you know what? Let's, for a moment, put the rules aside and let's see what we can do as we rethink our approach to our photography. This idea of design principles, I think it also helps us consider creative understanding. It gives it meaning. And we're going to dive in a little bit deeper on that, specifically of creative understanding and what this is all about. But the search for meaning in your photography, for me anyway, it's definitely continual, and a better understanding of that creative process will just simply help you succeed. So whether you're trying to be creative in photography or any other art or any other thing like that. I think this type of exercise where you're focusing on your creativity in your photography, it's going to spill out into other areas of life too, but that's certainly not something I'm going to promise or whatever. Also, though, success is not automatic. This definitely takes work. We certainly can stumble on success. I love it when I have an image that I shot and it was like kind of, I didn't really think much of it when I'm out in the field, and I get home and it's like, whoa, that's an amazing image. I've had that happen a couple of times for sure. I would rather have an experience though where I'm really jazzed about an image and then I get home and I process that image and then it's just like, yes, kind of like the image that's on screen here. This is Mount Newhall from Unalaska Island. Sunrise and trudging up that hill, Mount Ballyhoo, to get a different perspective. This was about 11:30 in the morning. Being that this was December, the sunrise was really late in the morning, and so we're trudging up there. But it just started poking through the clouds, and it was really thick clouds to begin with. And of course, if I had looked at the clouds and said, "Oh, it's not going to be worth it. I just need to pack it in and not even try today," then I wouldn't have hiked up that very steep mountain for the couple of 3 hours that it took to get up there. And I wouldn't have been in a position to get this shot. But I got the shot and the color was looking amazing. I come home and I process it, and the whole experience is relived once again. And that's the kind of thing that I think we can have a greater chance of achieving when we're thinking about the design principles and we're understanding, all right, this rule of photography doesn't work at all in this image. And so I'm going to focus on the design principles. I'm going to focus on what I'm given, and then I'm going to be able to communicate something about that because I know what I'm given. I know what my starting point is. All right, this conversation is really for you. Well, if you satisfy one of these three different items here. So you're comfortable with your gear and you just want to go further. So you know how the lenses work, the shutter speeds and all sorts of things. You know how your filters work and whatever else. You know how your post-production tools work. All that stuff, you're just really well versed in it. But you know there's something maybe a little bit missing in your photography. Maybe you feel a little bit stuck in your photography. Maybe you feel like there's just a little something more to be had. Maybe you've had some growth experiences and you've kind of gotten into a little bit of a rut. This is definitely for you as well. And then, of course, stuck creatively. That's something that one's a little harder to pin down and to budge someone out of. When we're stuck in our photography, we can feel like we're in a rut because we're doing the same kind of genre over and over again. And so it might feel a little easier to just say, well, let's look at this genre over here, and then that can bring new light. But what if just overall this is a heavier cloud where you're stuck more creatively? Well, then this is probably going to work for you too, at least a little bit. So these design principles, I like to claim that they equal creative understanding. And what we're talking about there is being able to articulate the purpose of the photograph. So we're going to take, in this case, a picture of the flag. And what is it made up of? All right, we have a triangle. We have various ways that we could think we're going to create triangles. That creates a certain amount of strength. That creates a certain amount of compositional strength is what I guess I'm trying to say. We certainly have some color. Although those blues, they really feel muted. The red is a little bit muted as well, but they're punchy, but they're not like just super full on saturated. We certainly have lines. We know also this is a flag, although those stars, being that this flag is backlit, those stars are actually silhouettes. They're not white. They're darker on that field of blue. So there's just differences here about what it is that is the representation of the flag and what it is that is truly, exactly, precisely described of what we're seeing. And so it's about distilling all of that and creating some kind of understanding. So if we can learn our design principles and have a good library of knowledge on what those things mean, we're going to then have an extension of greater and deeper creative understanding. If you'd like to do a self-study on your own, I recommend you get this book. It is Graphic Design, The New Basics by Ellen Lupton and Jennifer Cole Phillips. This is a book that I use in one of my design classes at the university, and it just takes you through a great understanding of these ideals, these design principles. And it's a great launching point. Now, this, of course, is a graphic design book. It is not about photography. You would then have to draw the cases, draw the lines to apply it to your photography for to do that book. But bullet point item number 2 here. Let's not be fooled. Not all photos are going to succeed. Just because we understand what's going on in an image as it relates to the design principles of what we see before us, it doesn't mean that we can make a successful image out of that image. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but it's about communicating. It's about stating what you want to say with your pictures, of course. So the bottom line is there's more to it. It doesn't make or break an image. The presence or lack thereof of design principles doesn't make or break an image. So what I like to think of this course is, in this conversation today, we're going to unravel at least a couple of the mysteries today. Certainly in the broader course, we unravel many more of them. We're going to make new discoveries about you and your creativity. And that's one thing, too. I really want to push the idea of please be willing to make mistakes and be willing to discover new things about you and your photography. I have a whole course. It lasts 10 weeks at the university. Almost everything as it relates to the notion of creativity is purely discovery based. It's an introductory level course. Certainly there's some skills building items, but it's all about, all right, let's throw this paint on the wall and let's see what happens. Well, okay, I don't literally do that. I literally have them throw paint on the floor, but with a large sheet of paper to catch the paint. But so then they can see what happens. And then they will manipulate that paint in a certain way. They will see how it goes, and then they'll modify it. They'll experiment and they'll test things out. And that's what we need to do in our photography. And if you're willing to do that, you will definitely have some growth opportunities. You will definitely have some growth experiences in your photography by really just cutting loose and letting go. That's what I really encourage people to consider doing as well. All right, this next section, we're going to be talking a little bit about vision, expression, and methods. So really what it boils down to, I have a thing here about, it's your job to turn chaos into order or to make sense of the chaos you're given. Really what it's about, if you learn nothing else in this conversation, it's about the overall goal of finding what you want to say and then finding ways to actually say it. So what is it about this? We're going to see a couple of images today from Stromberg, Czech Republic. And what is it about this image that, it's really not that chaotic. It doesn't feel that chaotic because of the way I've composed it, because of I was looking at, okay, what lens am I going to use? What time of day am I going to think about? Is that even an option I have where I have options to come back? What shutter, the vantage point, the angle of view, those kinds of things. And then understanding is going to be different here on screen than it is in real life, or on the print. It's going to be different than in real life as well. And so all of these types of decisions are certainly going on and swirling around in my head. But what is it that helps, I guess we can say, make my style? What is it that helps me distill all those items? I'm taking the forms, the boiled down design forms, as it were, not just literally the fact that I got a mountain and a tree, the forms that they create, but literally the shapes that they create, the lines, the textures, those kinds of things is what I'm talking about. And then, of course, the content, balancing it out with the table, the bench, the walkway, the wall, the signs that are posted to the tree trunk there on the right-hand side. the leaves, the different branches, all of those different objects create different forms. And then it's all about distilling that to create meaning, distilling that to create an image with meaning. I also removed color in this image because the color, quite frankly, wasn't doing anything. It didn't help me create the feeling, the meaning that I was wanting to create of this scene. So to find meaning in these things and then to learn how to best take advantage of it all, that's helping you create your style. And when you are creating your style and you're figuring that out, it just comes down to that overall notion strongly in the end, strongly coming through to just saying, hey, I'm striving to make a statement. I'm striving to provide a certain meaning. And here it is. Here's how I'm able to make that happen. With the idea of photographing a place, this whole notion of what is it that you even include in your frame? How do you distill that down? Well, you need to ask yourself, what moves you? Then capture that. As I'm walking down the road here in the Czech Republic, the texture of that window, I'm going to call it a doorway. It's not really a door. It's not really a shutter either. But anyway, the covering for the window, that really intrigued me. And then I was like, wow, check out the brick and how that becomes unveiled towards the bottom of the building. But if I had only photographed those objects, I think the image probably would have failed. It would have been boring. I needed to include a bit of the sense of the place. So I backed up a little bit. I'm literally standing across the road and I'm zoomed in a little bit, but I'm making a conscious decision to include the railing, to include the foliage, the greenery there, whatever that tree, shrubbery, whatever that thing is. And then that corrugated metal paneling there. There's just lots of stuff that's coming in. And that helps set the tone, set the feeling for what the place is all about. But maybe you weren't really, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe you're not sure. You like that idea of that window. You like that idea of the brick, and you're still just not sure even how to make this go about, how to capture this. And this is where I say, okay, take a step back and start sketching. Take a step back and just take a study of the place. You remove yourself from trying to make a creative commentary on the place, and you're simply trying to record the place. You do that in order to get back into the mode of actually trying to make a creative commentary on the place. And I did this in the city as here as well. So this next image is of Chicago. And when you're in the city, things are, especially a big city, things are constantly moving. And it may not be something that is easy, especially if you're like me. I've lived in a small town for over 30 years now. So that's way more than half my life. And when I go to a big city, whether it's Hong Kong or Chicago or wherever, Las Vegas, wherever, it doesn't matter. It is such a different experience for me. Usually an experience I'm not too fond of because I just like small town living, but I really have to switch my mode of thinking to that of being sketching with the camera or just trying to simply record what I have, because it's so dynamically different, so diametrically different, I probably should say, that I have to take a step back and kind of recalibrate my creative process. I'm considering, of course, light and the quality of light and the angles of the light and the objects and the movement and all sorts of things. I'm still trying to distill all these things. There's just a different sense of reality. And I need to switch to this idea of sketching the frame, sketching the scene. And I start that by just simply recording what's there. And, oh, good. It's a great way to start, because then at some point in time, things will click. And this is exactly what I tell my students too, when they're literally sketching in their sketchbooks with their pencils and such, their pens or markers or whatever. When they're trying to create a project, or they're trying to create solutions to a project, if they're having difficulty identifying where to start, what to even do, I literally tell them, just grab that pencil like you're a monkey and you just grab it in your fist. None of this dexterity with your fingers and such like that. No, just grab that sucker, slam it on the paper, and start moving it around. And literally just move at random. And that's kind of what we're dealing with here. The same equivalency here when I say we're sketching with our images. I'm just going to record this. I'm going to record that. And I'm going to break the ice, as it were, and get that creative process moving forward. When we're out in nature, maybe this is the same idea where it could be vastly different. The wilderness, it can also feel like, I only have one chance to be here and I better make the best image or I'm going to be really disappointed and things like that. So we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. Start with your sketching images, get the creative process moving, and then you'll be able to find ways to make these images that you're wanting to make. The vastness of the wilderness, it can be difficult to find something, that one thing that makes it all work. Where I think really in the city, it can really be the same idea, that one thing that makes it all work. It's something that makes the image what it needs to be in order to communicate your vision. Now, here's the other thing that I do, at least in nature. I don't do this so much in the city because I just don't find it personally helpful. But sometimes I'll literally put my camera away and I'll just sit there and I'll soak it in. And that can be extremely helpful too. When I'm out in nature, the reason I like to soak it in is because when I'm out in nature, I like to not get caught up in things that are not important. I view nature, when I'm in nature, I am definitely feeling closer to the creator, to God, the creator. And so there's a certain thing that's just, it opens up my mind. It opens up lots of things. And I just have a greater appreciation for it. But then that can also make me feel intimidated to say, this is so awesome. So I just let it soak in. And I let the meaning of what it is to just have a simple experience out there. After 5 minutes, after 30 minutes, whatever it is, then we start moving forward. And then we start with the sketching images. And then before you know it, you're really getting into it and you're really able to create images that have meaning. So yes, I like to soak it in first, and then I'll make images that will reflect that notion of what that mind shift, that mindset shift is all about. Now, certainly your approach may be different, and it's simply important to know what your approach is, to identify what works for you, and then to be able to capitalize on that, to be able to move forward with it and just do it, to exercise those creative muscles. The more you exercise, the stronger you become. And that's the same way in creativity as well. I love this question. We often think to ourselves about photography, a photograph, maybe a photographer, but in this case, a particular photograph. Is it good? This one also happens to come from the Czech Republic. Is it good? What makes a photograph good? Being able to determine that before we trip the shutter is, I think, an end result of what my creative process is all about. With lots of experience and with lots of understanding about subjects and about design principles and things like that, we're going to be able to identify if this is a good subject and if this is a good photograph. But it does depend on how the viewer is going to interpret your image. So does your viewer have the same impression of what your image is about? What's the point of the image that you've made? And does that point come across to the viewer? And sometimes it takes time for our understanding of an image to grow or to shift or to mold or to transform, whatever you want to call it, for good or for worse. What I'm getting at is in 10 years' time, I may look at this image and I may be like, what was I thinking? Or in 10 years' time, I may look at this image and I may be like, wow, this is amazing. The really the biggest thing is I'm just wanting you to be okay with this idea that we grow in our photography, and as we look back, let's not be ashamed or let's not be knocking ourselves too silly when we realize how much we've grown and how much we've changed. There was I can look at I published a photography book in 2007, and I can look at some of those images, and I'll look at them and well, it depends on which image, but I'll look at them and I'll say, wow, I do not shoot like that anymore. And it's just about the overall interpretation of the subject. And it's not that it's a bad image. It's just my style has changed. And then I'll look at other images and say, wow, I definitely shoot. That's a bad image. So yeah, it just, as you grow, things will grow too. Your image making will grow. But can we understand what is the emphasis? Can we understand, are there technical issues to overcome? Can we understand the emotional impact that the image has on us? These things definitely change with time. And whether it changes in the time from when you shot it to when you do post-production, this is why I like to actually sit on it a little bit. From the time that I shoot something to the time I do post-production, I don't usually do post-production right away. I like to let it sink in a little bit. And by letting it sink in, I have a better guarantee for myself that there's a little bit of a longer term interest, a longer term excitement about that specific image. All right. We've got this one image of these roots. What about this image? This is from Veracruz, Mexico. Very similar subject. We have the roots, but your reaction, my reaction, is going to be very different about this. I mean, we have this wall structure that these roots are growing up, whereas the other one, the roots were on this hillside, and we had no man-made objects, no significant man-made objects in the scene anyway. And so it's just very different, yet there's certainly some similarities. I mean, it's black and white. Each image is black and white. The roots are the main object, just different in structure, different surroundings. So the point is, we have a different story. As we have different stories, as we have different meanings or different purposes in the image, I think we're going to open ourselves up also to utilizing different design principles to achieve those different purposes. We have a very distinctly different set of texture, meaning of texture, of contrast, of lines. All of those exist in both images, but they mean different things. But I used each one of those items, texture, lines, contrast, amongst other things. I used each of those in different ways to tell different stories. And that's what it boils down to. It's being able to say, I'm given a certain subject, I'm given a certain sense of that subject, and here's how I'm going to frame up the subject so I can create a certain commentary on that subject. Certainly, the process takes time. It'll likely, things will evolve over several weeks or months. For me, it's certainly been evolving over several years. I love this metaphor of the tree in this waterfall. I think it can work two ways. As a photographer, you are solid in your photographic interests and you know what you like. It's probably a good thing. And the world is in a constant set of motion or movement all around you. All right? That can be one way of looking at this image as a metaphor for you in your life as a photographer. Or here's another way to consider this. You feel stuck. You don't know the answers to many questions about yourself and your photography. Possibly it's due to external issues or it's internal issues. Either way, some self-reflection can go a long way in getting deeper and realizing what's important for you and your photography. Being patient and thoughtful, though, definitely is going to be helpful as we move through these next portions of not only today's conversation, but as you use this as a springboard to launch you forward. So maybe you'll be inspired to revisit some places. that you've been before, and you'll want to create a new commentary. Maybe you'll want to hit that rewind button and say, "What did you say, Brent?" Please, definitely feel free to do that. I would love for you to do that. This is certainly a good thing. So let's move on and let's see what we're going to do with these next sections that we're going to be talking about. Identifying yourself, your photographic self. All right, so a few questions to ask yourself. What are your interests in life and in photography? Do they coincide? Do they mesh somehow? I know for me, my different phases of life, definitely things have changed over time. I have almost always known that I love to travel. So what interests me in life? I am a curious person. And by traveling and wandering this big, beautiful earth of ours, this image is Hong Kong, by the way, from Victoria Peak. By traveling around, I'm able to satisfy some of that curiosity. And so I have my camera with me to help record and help tell the story and to help myself be creative and to help myself as I'm walking through life and trying to understand life. It is definitely a deeper structure for me, a deeper meaning for me. But I like to start simple. These are simple questions. I think the questions are simple, but they have complex answers, I think is what I'm trying to get at. When you get into your photography, think about the main interests that you have in photography. So for me, definitely it's about the great outdoors. It's about traveling. It's about trying to find something that is a part of creation or is a commentary on creation that I'm able to use my personal creativity to make a commentary on that which is created. Now, in these things with the buildings, okay, these are man-made objects, but we certainly have the natural forms of the harbor, the Hong Kong harbor here, and the Kowloon Peninsula and whatnot. So lots of things that we could, dive in way too deeply on. But whatever it is that motivates you, that's what I'm trying to help you identify. So motivating your personal interests in life and your photography interests in life, identify 2 or 3 genres that really get you motivated to get out there and shoot. And that's what I want you to feel confident in doing. All right. How about naming 3 sources of inspiration? This can get difficult. So maybe it's the intricate natural world or cultures and people. Are you inspired by internal items or external sources? Inspiration can drive creativity, and sometimes creativity can drive more inspiration, and the cycle continues. Where does imagination fit in for you? And how often do you imagine certain goals, outcomes, or solutions with your photography? Do you dream about your photography? I tell you, I dream all the time. Oh, I would love to do this. I would love to go there. I would love to fill in the blank. There's lots of different ways that we can get this moving forward for us. But all right, 3 sources of inspiration. What might they be? Yeah, for me, definitely cultures. I love witnessing other cultures, witnessing other peoples. I like to say that one of my favorite sentences in life that I'm probably internalizing more than I externalize is help me understand, and then fill in the blank. So help me understand how the wind blew the sand into these ripples. Well, I can only do that if I'm out there actually experiencing the sand and the wind and watching them form. At least that's I think the best way I can do that. That's probably the best way to put it. The best way I can do that is to experience it myself. The natural world is very interesting to me. And then just satisfying my curiosity about all those things. Those are things that really are, I believe, are 3 sources of inspiration. Okay, what if we lack inspiration? And I have this picture of a prison. This is from the historic Idaho jail. Anyway, I'm not suggesting that if we lack inspiration, we're going to prison, but I can sure feel like it. it can feel like we're trapped, and it can feel like we have no options. And that can be something that really is going to put a big old hitch in our get along, as it were. So if you're lacking inspiration, look at and study the work of others. Ask yourself critical questions. Why do you like or dislike the work? And I would say make sure you find some works that you absolutely dislike. I know there are some major photographers whose work I look at and I'm just like, I don't get it. Now, I'm not going to go naming names here, but I'll just say I don't get it. Why does this photographer have the reputation they have when they're making images like that? Now, it's usually one or two off images. I can understand they have a big reputation for other images that they've made that I can certainly get behind. But sometimes they'll put something out, and I'm just like, I don't get it. And this might be something from decades ago, or it might be from 3 days ago. It doesn't matter. Make sure you identify things that you don't like, though, just as importantly as it is to identify things that you do like. Find a place to go that's new, and don't take your camera. This is, again, if you're lacking inspiration, what do? Go to a place that's new to you and don't take your camera. Just walk around and absorb the scene a bit. Ensure that you're relaxed and that you don't feel rushed. A sense of being rushed, it will crush that creative potential, so we don't want to do that. So take a break. I tell my students this all the time, especially as we get towards the end of a quarter and they are feeling stressed. Stress is one of the biggest killers of, I'm going to call it, natural creativity. Certainly stress can help you be creative. I totally recognize that. I've experienced it myself. But what I'm talking about, this natural creativity, is this propensity to just look at, understand, and say, yes, I am tapping into these natural interests that I have, and this is how I'm going to extend my commentary on these things, and it's all fine and good, and everything's happy, go lucky, whatever. All right, so take a break. You definitely will benefit, especially if you're in post-production, you've been going crazy for an hour or two. It's time to take about a 20-minute break. Just step away, come back with fresh eyes, and things will happen. All right, what else do you do if you're lacking inspiration? Definitely go out on a shoot with others and just be in the company of others, other creatives, is a wonderful way to address this notion of being stuck and just lacking this idea of inspiration. All right, now we're going to look at identifying your photographic self and describing your voice as a photographer. You will never know your voice as a photographer if you don't experiment and push the boundaries of what's possible. Imagine the possibilities, experiment, and take risks. And most of all, be willing to take risks. I'd mentioned earlier about this notion of discovery, this idea of opening yourself up to trying something new and discovering something about yourself. Oh, good stuff. Are you out there fulfilling a, quote, naive passion where you don't really have a care in the world about what you're doing and what other people think, but you're certainly still enjoying the work? Or do you have more of an informed passion about your photography? This is where you're aware of the obstacles in the work and you work yourself around them. And you're looking to find just the right composition to say what you want to say about your subject. Find some common traits in your images that transcends the different genres that you shoot. This would require you to spend some time. As you're looking for understanding your voice as a photographer, go through your images and see what happens. See what is common amongst your various genres that you shoot. Those patterns will become evident in identifying your photographic voice. It's so abstract, though. It can feel really abstract, especially if you've never done this before. So consider a non-visual, what you're doing is you're considering a non-visual term to describe your image making. That is your voice. There's nothing visual about a voice. It's all audio. It's all other things, but it's not visual. And we're in the visual arts. We're in the visual realm of communication. All right. Maybe you can think of it as your photographic perspective or your point of view. Maybe that helps. Initially, this can be very difficult to describe, but I encourage you to boil it down to the bare essence and then add things back as they make sense to do so. For example, it might be something as simple as, I like my edges to be straight and no converging lines. All right, that is the bare essence of describing something. But maybe there's a certain stylistic technique that has other ramifications. And whatever it is, that's a start. So as you're looking throughout your images, maybe that's a common trait. Straight edges, no converging lines. All right, there's a starting point for a voice, a photographic voice. Kind of like this image. Straight lines, no converging lines. When I'm shooting architecture, for me, that's something that's important to me because the way I feel about it is I don't want those lines to be a distraction to the viewer. And if there's something that's uneven about how they are aligned in the frame, then I think that is a bit of a distraction. So that's why I like to line things up really uniformly. All right. Other options. Here we go with the idea of an overarching goal. Do you have an overarching goal? They could be to inform someone, to inspire someone, to entertain, or to cause a movement, to support a purpose, or to simply share your view of the world. Maybe something I'm not even mentioned here. But as you're looking to identify your voice as a photographer, understanding your overarching goal that you have, that's also going to really help you achieve what you want to achieve there. All right. Should you have multiple goals with your photography? Well, I don't know that I have a problem with multiple goals in one's photography, but having more than one goal, more than 5 goals, whatever you want to call it, it does cause you to get a bit dispersed. And you can feel like you're not going to have any progress in any one of them. So as long as you're able to clearly articulate your goals, I think you're good to go. So repeat them over and over and commit them to memory. I would say probably if you have more than 3 goals to start out with, you probably have too many. So whatever it is that your goals are, be able to clearly articulate them and then add more as you feel comfortable adding more. Get some experience under your belt with this new direction, and then you're going to be able to add more. All right, this next slide is all about remaining open to inspiration. And what I want to encourage you on this main ideal is to just say, don't shut yourself off. We've talked a lot about understanding what it is that's in our past, what it is that makes up our interests and things like that. But I don't want us to shut the door, as it were. So yes, remain focused on your overall purpose, but keep an open eye on what serendipity may bring your way. So half the reason photography is so fun to me is those little creative surprises that we're treated with whenever we go out on a shoot. Certainly the goals can and probably will, and maybe even should, change over time. Permanence of these goals are not what's important here. In fact, I would say if you are completely unmoving in your goals for your photography, then you will become stagnant. And artists, creative folks, we tend to fear stagnation. So I don't want us to think that we can never change. But also we shouldn't be flippant or casual in our goals because then we'll be all over the place. And our point and purpose is to create work with meaning. And if we're casual and flippant with our goals, how can we create work with meaning? So as you grow, your goals will grow too. And it's important that the work resonates with you. And I've already made this, I think, this comment is where I said, when you're looking back on your work and you recognize that you have changed, that's good. That's probably a good thing. That will help you as you're redefining where you're going in the future. All right, what makes you you? And to borrow a phrase, I'm going to use the phrase that Rick Salmon, when he was on my podcast about, I don't know, it was a couple years ago now. What is your superpower? when I am getting to know a new student, I always ask them what their interests or hobbies are, because that really helps me understand truly who they are. Now, if it's someone who says, well, photography is my hobby, well, I'm going to be like, okay, what is your non-photography interests? These insights will usually help me in understanding exactly what I need to know to help them figure out whatever they need to pull out their creativity and to work this creative process. My personal superpowers are curiosity, emotional intelligence, and dedication to seeing the project through to the finish. It may take me a while, but I rarely leave a project unfinished. So when you're identifying what makes you you and what is your superpower, I want you to think broadly, not about a specific skill like, oh, I'm good at driving the speed limit or I'm good at whatever. I want you to think about these larger traits that define you as a person. These traits should be outside of photography. So nothing in this little tiny tidbit of what we're talking about, nothing photography related should be considered. So what's your superpower? And disassociate yourself from your photography. Maybe communication is a superpower. Yay! And you just choose photography to be your medium of communication. Fine. But for the purposes of what we're doing right now, let's disassociate photography from the equation. Once you've figured these items out, think how these traits inform your photography. I've mentioned a couple of times about how I'm curious. I haven't said anything about emotional intelligence, though. Emotional intelligence is something that when you have emotional intelligence, you're able to read a person. You're able to read either a group of people or an individual, and you're able to understand how what you are saying or doing is affecting them through their nonverbal communication points. Maybe it is through their verbal communication points, then it becomes quite clear. But with emotional intelligence, you're really tuning in to what's going on in that person's body energy, I guess we can call it. My youngest son, he's 9 years old right now. He has oodles of emotional intelligence. He can really sense when mommy is having a bad day or just something's not right. And she's not really, she's not complaining. She's not whatever, but he can sense it. And it's really cool to see how he reacts and how he tries to serve because he's trying to help. And so that can be another superpower. Maybe you're just helpful. Maybe you can help people. That might be another superpower of yours. Whatever it is your superpowers are, let's try and identify those so we understand who you are as a photographer. So then we recognize that making your art is more about who you are. And then you are who you are in life and not about how you react to others' work. I think that's the fundamental foundation we're trying to lay here. We've gone through a lot of things that says, leading up to this point, basically, I guess, it all comes down to, all right, let's be founded. Let's have a nice solid foundation of understanding who we are. And in so doing, we're going to be able to make images that no one else can make and that we're also proud of. Good stuff when that happens. Your authenticity is key, though. No one's perfect, and I don't think we should strive for perfection, at least with one's photography. I want you to strive for authenticity and reality. You can't fake. Well, okay, you can try and fake authenticity, but it doesn't usually work. And if you do, of course, then you're not being authentic in the first place. So just get rid of all that extra junk and just be authentic. But surely your creativity and your life in general, we all have shortcomings. Of course we do. And the question is, here's the question. Are those shortcomings holding you back? Are they big enough stumbling blocks that keep you from enjoying photography and being successful at it? there's been a few times in my life where that has definitely, absolutely been the case. And one of those was actually, I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here, so forgive me. One of those actually was just a few months ago, where I thought, sure, I was going to be moving the family overseas because I had a job opportunity that I was not looking for. And I got so sidetracked and I got so bullheaded, I guess is the term I like to use for myself, in trying to make this thing work. And my photography suffered, my creativity suffered because I put so much energy into this. And I thought it was hugely important. It has become such an important part of now of my history of life, my story of life, that it has changed my outlook moving forward. That is almost so weird to admit, to say out loud, but it is the truth. Things came to an absolute screeching halt with an item that basically, how do I put this gently? With an item that should have, I guess, been obvious to begin with, but I thought I had done my homework. And anyway, it turned out that this policy brought us to a screeching halt. And then it just, everything fell apart. And I was a bit frustrated with life. I was a bit frustrated spiritually speaking. There was frustration coming out my ears. It was so bad. Vomiting frustration. Not in a literal sense, but it was a stumbling block. Was this something where I was not being authentic? No, I don't think it was a case of me not being authentic, but I did have some shortcomings. I did have something in my life that was a big enough stumbling block that kept me from producing at a level that I usually produce at. And now that that's over and I'm through it by several months now, I feel like I'm producing at an even higher level. I feel like I'm on fire, and that is the kind of thing. That's the type of authenticity that I'm talking about for you. Is I hope you can really have a good sense of comfort in your skin, so you can feel on fire too, and you're doing the right thing. All right. What we're going to talk about next is who your photography is for. So we'll take it kind of a little bit of a, I don't know if we're going to call this a break or anything. I'm not doing anything special here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to play a jingle. I'm just trying to say, okay, let's put that a little bit of us to the side, and then let's open up another way of thinking, another way of understanding what it is we're going to be doing here. Okay, so determining important factors related to feedback and who your photography is for. So, what's important here? Who cares if other people like it? Do you like it? I hear this all the time. I see this in Facebook groups all the time, where an emphasis is placed on whether or not you as an individual even like your photography. And that should be the only litmus test that you use to determine whether or not your photography is good. I am of the camp that as an artist, that makes a whole lot of sense. As a designer, that almost makes zero sense. Because the purpose of a designer is to create a message that resonates with people. I am equally an artist and a designer. So it is important to me that the work that I create satisfies me as an individual artist, but it's also important for me to understand that the work that I create is reaching people and that I'm able to communicate the message that's important to me with those people. If I can't do that, then half of the reason why I shoot is pointless. And I want to be able to create something that has impact and has meaning for other people. So that's the baseline of my understanding. That's the baseline of my point and purpose. Your baseline for your point and purpose is, well, really what I want you to get out of this is to be clear on that. That's the most important thing. Are you looking to have an impact on other people, or are you looking to have personal satisfaction in the work that you do? As long as you're clear on that, then we're going to have a great conversation together. If you're not clear on that, that's where I'm going to invite you. Make sure, please, that we do get clear on that, because that does affect how you move going forward. That does affect how you react, I should say, going forward. All right. So do they like it? Do other people like it? It's important to, I guess, ask, do the right people like it? Or do they have the response you want them to have? That's truly I think the fundamental value of when I'm trying to create something, when I'm trying to communicate something. Was I accurate? Was I successful in having them react, having them understand what I want them to understand when they look at my image and they hear the story of my image, especially, but when they look at my image anyway? As long as I can answer that in the affirmative, then I think I've got a good thing. I think I've been successful. And that's what these design principles will help us do. Understanding how design principles work and how they create messages, how they form or inform messages, will help us reach people more effectively than we were before, at least most likely anyway. And this is where we also then come to say your work isn't for everyone, i.e., you will not satisfy everyone with your work. So let's just get that. We probably already knew that, but still, it had to be said. So what is important is that you find a way to speak to the right people. But seeking approval from others is also a challenge. And giving their approval, do they really have your best interests in mind? Does their approval matter so much to you that your photography is worthless without it? Oh, goodness, I hope not. That would be terrible. So I'm not advocating a position that says it must be liked by the public or it's just a bunch of poop. That's not anywhere near what I'm getting at. But I do hope that you will consider who your photography is for, because if you're not reaching them, if you're not speaking to them, then your images virtually have zero meaning. And that is zero meaning outside of you, outside of your realm. We also, though, don't want people whose name is mom or husband or wife or whatever to be our only audience either if we're looking for this type of growth and this type of feedback. We need people that are very different than us to have some kind of valuable understanding so we know how effective we are. All right, so with that in mind, let's take a look now at the first item of what I call visual form making. So I've told you this is, I started out by saying this is all part of a course. And what we've just been through are snippets of the first two modules in this course. And so I say snippets because there's actually a lot more to it. There's a lot more to understanding some of the background elements. There's a lot more to understanding how to be successful in creating successful images and boiling down and distilling a few things. Even before we get to the design principles, there's more things that are still there. So we're going to shift our gears now just a little bit, and we're going to start talking about what I call visual form making. This visual form making will cover in total, what is it, about 6-7 different design principles, somewhere in there. I forget exactly what it is. We'll look at it in a moment. Maybe it's 5 different design principles. And then the first one, though, is contrast. And then we also have hierarchy and lines. And these would include horizontal, vertical, curvy, diagonal lines, visual weight and scale, basic balance, and of course, thinking about the border. But this one that we're only going to be talking about right now is contrast. Now, there's different ways to be thinking about contrast. There's, of course, the difference between brights and darks. And on this particular image, I've got a representation of the histogram down there in the lower corner. We've got a few shadow areas, especially right underneath this boat. This is in Croatia, by the way. We've got some highlight areas, which are the boat. And then we got a whole host of midtones. And you can see how that's reflected in the histogram. So this image, if you were to look at the histogram, you'd say, well, yeah, we have tones that are spread out. We have some really bright tones and we have some really dark tones. But the massive body of the image is not that contrasty. Well, but then we look at the image, we can see, I think anyway, it actually is contrasty because the placement of the really bright tones and the really dark tones are really close together. And so that increases sort of the vibration, as it were, that increases the visual interest. And then the surrounding elements, because we have a motion blur going on with a long shutter speed, that creates a different level of interest. Because of all the blurriness, though, there is no other type of contrast. About the only type of contrast we have in this image is the difference between lights and darks. And this next image also is about the difference between lights and darks, but it's just a very different composition overall. So greater contrast. Take a look at that histogram. We have loads of darks and quite a few highlights. So it is also, again, lights and darks, but virtually no midtones as compared to that other image. What are the forms of contrast do we see here? Because so often when we think about contrast, we're thinking, okay, this is about the lights and darks. And I'm addressing contrast first. Also, why am I even addressing contrast first? The reason I'm addressing contrast first is because, quite frankly, it is the thing, the design principle that I usually look at first in trying to determine whether or not a scene is interesting. Contrast gives interest. And so what do we have here? We have highlights, we have brights and darks, but we also have contrasts in shapes and sizes. We have contrasts a little bit, at least, in texture, just a tiny amount of contrast in texture, whether it's the sky behind the tree, which is extremely devoid of any type of texture, quite frankly. It's quite smooth. We have the Adriatic Sea, which has a little bit of tiny amount of texture in it, and which is a slightly different tone than the sky and from the sidewalk type area. And then we have the sandy dirt and the concrete type stuffs in those types of textural contrast elements. So there is contrast in other ways. So let's take another look at another picture in Croatia and think about the contrasts in these textures. There are many different textures at work here, from the pathway to the leaves to the water's surface and the waterfalls themselves. It can get a bit overwhelming visually, and it's certainly your job as a photographer to not let it get out of hand. That can be difficult in an image like this. The biggest key, the biggest factor for how I let it not get out of hand was by not introducing more distracting elements. And what I mean by that specifically is being very patient and waiting for all the people to leave the scene. I was there at Plymouth Lakes when it was very crowded, and I was just like, I just can't have all these people in the scene. It's nice sometimes to have people in the scene, but this was just too much. And I needed to eliminate that factor, to eliminate those items. And so I just was patient, and I waited, I don't know, maybe it was 5-10 minutes, whatever it was. I was just patient, and it worked out. Also, though, we have a very strong sense of commanding shape in that boardwalk. The lines are so strong in that boardwalk, the overall energy line created in that boardwalk. That also very much helps, I think, in this image, because it almost, well, it does make it, contrast is almost a secondary element. The power of the line, the moving line, the curved line, that is the boardwalk, that is the dominant factor, the dominant feature. the textures actually are not the dominant feature. And so because we have a different level of hierarchy in what is a dominant feature, that's another reason why I believe this image works. If I didn't have that, and I just showed a mishmash of textures and such, we would have chaos. If it were my point to get across with chaos, to communicate chaos, well, great, it would work fine. But that wasn't my point. My point was to show the beauty of the place and to have a sense of calm and relaxation. And by creating this very strong graphic element that is these lines, by depicting that, composing that in a way that it becomes a very strong element, that helped make a successful image. All right, what about this sense of contrast, ancient and modern elements? So we have the ancient wall, and then we have the modern signage in particular, but then, of course, the tables and the chairs and the whatnot. But yeah, there's some contrast there for sure. I'm pretty much throwing it in there just for fun, but you get the idea. There's different types of contrasts that can make different statements. All right, how about contrast of movement? So here we're at Krka National Park in Croatia, and so we have that moving water, and then we have the leaves, and we've got the boardwalk that I'm standing on. We've got lots of things that are just rendered very rock solid still. But of course, that flowing water is helping create this overall sense of a contrast between these elements. Now, when we think about contrast and size, oftentimes we'll get into that and we think, oh, we're talking about scale. Of course, that definitely works. The notion of scale works for sure. We're going to look at that. We do look at that in a very specific sense in a very specific lesson in the course. But this overall sense of scale that we can think about is a type of contrast. In this case, though, it only requires that items be different size in the frame. And so you can also think, though, about your impression or the understanding of actual size and how that also is affected by your overall, I guess, interest in the scene. Because when we're thinking of the impression of something that is big or small, and that is, in a sense, contrast of size, there's just that element of wonder, that element of an extra impression is made, I guess is the biggest thing I want to come out with. That is, it is just that little extra piece that gives it a little extra interest. I guess that's the bottom line that we're getting at. All right, contrast of color. What in the world are we thinking about here with a contrast of color? Well, okay, orange and green. We just have very different colors. They can be very powerful. We can place emphasis right where you want it when you're using color. You can also pull the eye towards something else, pull the eye away from things, bring them towards things. Depending on how you use color and how you compose these different elements, contrast will help you provide, of course, visual interest, as I've said before. But then there's these other things that it will do. Does it draw your eye? Does it distract your eye? Whatever the case is. And in one sense, too, I just love this, where it pulls your eye, it places an emphasis right where you want it. In this case, this orange door. But it can also pull your eye away so strongly, in this image in particular, that you don't even see the little flowers in the lower right-hand corner. Or at least you forget about them right away, and you don't give them a second glance. So we have those little purplish, whitish, purplish flowers there. They're so insignificant. I would submit if we didn't see that orange door, we probably would have concentrated more on those flowers. All right, I'm actually going to have an assignment. Can you believe that? All right, so this assignment, if you would like to put these items in the Facebook group for the Great Outdoors Photography Podcast. So if you're not a member of that, you need to ask to be a member of that. But I want to invite you to actually put these items in there. So we're going to have this assignment for you, this little mini assignment. Go through your library of images from the last 6 months or so and select 3 photographs that show different types of contrast. Submit them to the Facebook group for the Great Outdoors Photography Podcast, and we'll be able to have a nice little will just enjoy your work. That'll be amazing. I would love to see it. Briefly describe the following about each image: the location that you shot the image, or the background info, whatever makes sense. The type of contrast exhibited. So is it colors? Is it shapes? Is it textures? Is it, lights and darks, whatever. And what you might consider doing differently in the future, if anything. I'm also going to invite you to ask whether or not you want specific criticism, specific constructive criticism. Certainly when you post things there under this context of the mini assignment, I think we're going to understand that responses will be there. But I invite you to share the idea that you're just looking to share just for the sake of sharing and so we can enjoy it. Or are you sharing so that we can, so that you can have some feedback? So please put a thing in there that says specifically you're looking also for feedback as well. And maybe also this notion of that last question, what would you do differently in the future? It doesn't have to necessarily be specific about this design principle of contrast. It can be about your perspective or anything overall in the photography experience. So just, whatever. I'm just trying to not limit you, I guess, in saying that you should do this only in relation to the idea of contrast. That's not necessarily the case. So let's cycle back to this whole idea. Who will you become photographically? Certainly you're passionate about your photography. I think that's a given. And you have a unique voice. Sometimes it doesn't seem effective. Sometimes you might feel scattered, like you're all over the place. Maybe you're fairly good with your camera and you know how to set the right adjustments. You get the type of image that you're looking to create. And in my course, you're going to be unraveling the mysteries and how you'll be making new discoveries about yourself and your creativity. With what we just covered, that's a lot of stuff. There's more to it in the first two modules, and then that form-making module, like we saw, there's things on hierarchy and lines and all sorts of extra design principles. And so I invite you to consider taking this next step. And what I say here is, let's begin. What I'm talking about specifically is going through the course together, the entire course together, and finding a way to make 2024 a breakthrough year for your photography. So with that in mind, let's take a look at what we've got going on and what the plan is as making 2024 a breakthrough year for your photography. So I've got the website up here now, and you'll find the link in your show notes or in the description down below. You can also just go to the website, click on this online courses item or hover over it, take a look at this first item here, Designing Creativity and Photography, and it'll take you right to this page. So Designing Creativity and Photography, your key to building more confidence in your compositions. This is all about you and your photography and just digging deep into your creativity. And of course, as I've been talking all along, getting that idea out where your creativity is communicated. The goals and purposes you have are communicated. And that's what we're going to be doing here. But let's take a look and see specifically how we're going to do that. And to kind of sort of review a little bit, my idea is that my basic premise is that while you're going to find lots of similarities between what we call the rules of photography and these design rules, these design principles, I should say. But whenever we think about rules, I know this is true for me anyway, whenever I think about these rules, I suddenly think of something that is, if I don't meet it, if I don't pay attention to that, then suddenly something is going wrong. And that's not how photography is. Photography is a lot more fluid and a lot more... we need to be a lot more forgiving of these types of things. And I just like this idea of unleashing myself, and those rules, they create some kind of gridlock for me. And I know they can do that for you too. So then what we're looking to do here is focus on these design principles. We're going to release our struggles with the creative process that I encourage and that I teach. We're going to achieve more meaning in our work, and we're going to celebrate that ideal of creative freedom. So a quick rundown of what the course includes overall: 5 in-depth modules to begin with. There's actually 6 in total, and we're going to take a look at those as we scroll down further just a little bit, but 5 in-depth modules to begin with. And then another module will come out with 4 lessons in it. And each lesson will be released on the first of the month for the first 4 months, starting January 1. We're also going to have twice a month live sessions for 3 months. So that's going to start on February 4. So we're going to go with that Sunday, February 4. We're going to then let you have some fun if you're into football with the Super Bowl on the 11th. And then we'll come back and go with more wonderful things on the 18th. And then we'll just continue every 2 weeks. You're also going to get lifetime access to the course material, the course content, and of course the live session recording. So we're going to be recording these live sessions that'll happen on Zoom, and you'll be able to come back and brush up on those ideas, refresh something, whatever the case is. You have access to it for whenever you want to access it. There's a bonus to this whole thing. This is the thing that I'm most happy about, I'm most proud of, and that is being able to print 6 of your own images. Now, I've got a print here of one of my monthly release items. This is, I believe it's for November, and I'm just so excited to be able to print for you and send you 6 13 by 19 prints. I'm going to walk through the entire process with you, and we're going to make sure we do the best we can to get some exquisite prints out of your photography. This might be a little bit of a challenge if you don't have a calibrated screen, but that's where I'm going to be taking a look at it before I hit the print button. I'm going to be looking at it and just making sure, is this really what you wanted? As you are communicating to me through our live sessions where we're talking about these prints, you're going to be able to communicate to me, and of course in the email and whatever else, you're going to communicate to me what your point and purpose is. How bright should this really be? What is this intended to come across as? And then as I'm looking at it on my screen, I'll be able to look at it and just agree and say, yes, this achieves your goals, or maybe I need to make a few tweaks. And so maybe I'll go ahead and do that. Maybe I'll reach back out to you and say, hey, tweak it this way or that way. Whatever it is that we need to do, we're going to just go case by case on each print, and we're going to be able to make sure that we can get the best quality print for you. And then, of course, I ship it to you. So we'll then put it in your hands. You're going to have some great prints to put on your wall and be proud of. And I'm just really excited to be able to do this for you with to wrap up this whole experience, wrap up this whole course, it makes it feel like a workshop, really. And then we're going to have a bonus live session where we're going to be taking a look at your prints. And that's all we're going to talk about, is just what does it mean? How did this come across to you when you actually see it in print? There is definitely something else, something that is really special when it comes to looking at your print, when it comes to thinking about, wow, my photograph looked like this on screen, but now it's in print. This is amazing. And so at least that's how I feel when I look at a really good quality print. All right, certainly time is limited. The enrollment of this course does close on January 7. So you want to make sure that you're going to be able to sign up by then. But there is one thing I am going to do. I decided I would do for Black Friday. So if you're listening to this before the end of Black Friday, Cyber Monday, I'm going to do a $50 deal, and it will be good through Cyber Monday. So as we're coming into the holiday weekend, Thanksgiving holiday weekend here in the U.S., I'm going to get some specific dates for you now so I don't have to just guess what's going on. So the 27th of November, if you can sign up by the 27th of November, make sure you use that coupon code. It's just going to be simply BF2023, so BF 2023. But it will be good through the 27th. As you scroll down on the page, there's going to be the form, and I'll highlight that in a moment, but There's going to be a big old thing there. You have a coupon code, you click on that, and you can type in your coupon code. So if you are after that, of course, it's going back to the regular price. So as we're looking forward to this new year, this 2024 season of photography, this is most definitely an investment. It's an investment of your time and effort and resources, and certainly some of those resources is money. And I certainly just want to understand that and make sure that you understand this is about setting the frame for just an amazing amount of growth in your photography, an amazing amount of confidence in the compositions that you're developing, an amazing amount of being able to be sure that you're communicating. You're on the right path anyway for communicating, learning to communicate with more intent through your photography. Your goal is to learn how to simply take advantage of what's there. This is what happens when you follow this process that I'm teaching. Take advantage of what's there and not fret about your inability to meet all these rules, requirements. You'll always have a design principle present. That's one of the key tenets of my belief about our creativity in photography. Design principles, they simply are always present. You always have at least one, way more than that usually, but at least one always. And when you learn about the design principles, you'll learn how to communicate more strongly with your photography. All right, let's get into a little bit of the detail of what is specifically in the course content. Module 1 is all about the foundational understanding, or as I call it here, giving you the tools for a great start. Just some ideas of setting the stage, looking and seeing, comparing your eyes to the digital sensors, and a little bit of vision and responding. Now, in this episode, that first hour or so, we talked about a lot of this, but we didn't dive into everything that's here. Also in Module 2, you and your goals, knowing what's important to you. We also talked about some of this in this episode, but again, we have more to get, just more details, more items to come through, more thoughts. And what will it be like when you can ask your own questions and you can have your own conversation with me and the others that are enrolled in this course? It's going to be amazing. The level of understanding that you're going to have is going to just crack wide open, and I'm just really looking forward to that. All right, Module 3 is all about cracking the visual language code. These design principles, whether it's contrast, hierarchy, lines, visual weight and scale, border patrol, these are kind of the easier ones, though. These are the ones that I view them as our building blocks. When we get into Module 4 and 5, we're going to look at color studies. This is the idea of no more confusion about color. Let's wrap our minds around this whole idea with some definitions to start off with, some exercises. Then we're going to look at what it means to use color. And then, of course, we wrap it up with color meanings. What meanings, what definitions are associated with these colors? And then we move on to Module 5, and this is all about making sense of compositional choices. This is where we really take the biggest leap. This is going to be the item that sort of separates the children from the adults, as it were, when it comes to thinking about your compositional understanding, your planning process, what happens when you bring things together in new ways, new exciting ways. We look at forms and shapes and framing. We're kind of taking baby steps into it. But when we get into Gestalt Theory 1 and 2, this is where the excitement really happens. Now, a little bit of a spoiler alert. It's actually, I think, as I put here on the website, it's probably simpler than you'd expect. So there's a lot of mystery, I think, that comes about when we think about this idea of Gestalt. It's so ethereal. It's so nebulous. It's so ill-defined. And I'm going to take a slice of the understanding of what Gestalt is about and apply it directly to photography. So this isn't going to be something that is super, super broad and super, super in-depth and whatnot like that. It is purely about how do we apply these things to our photography, but it is a little bit of a, crack in the mind, so to speak. Now, all of these are set to be released before the new year. December 28th is when I have them. They might be released a little earlier than that, but at the very latest, they'll be released December 28th. And then these are the new ones. So these are the ones that I talk about that will be released going forward into the new year. More visual language code breaking. This is module 6, where we're going to finish it up with texture, pattern, motion, layers, and transparency, and how all of these things just simply apply to your photography. So I invite you, tap into your natural God-given creativity. You are, most definitely, you are creative. Sometimes I so understand, I've been in this way too, been in this ideal too, where you don't feel creative, or you struggle because you think you could be more creative, or you should be more creative, or whatever thing is holding you back. I can tell you, I have seen it. I know what it's familiar to me. I know what you're going through. Whatever it is you got, I'm pretty sure I've seen it in the 16 years of teaching that I've been doing. But by learning my creative process and this language of visual communication, you're going to be making photographs. I'm pretty sure, I know, you're going to make photographs that are as unique as you are. And that's a good thing. Trust me, you are unique. That's a good thing. And you're going to make images that only you can make. Now, here's another thing. You're probably already doing that to a certain degree. We're going to take it up a notch. We're going to take it up maybe 2 notches. And we're going to make them really sing about your images. It's going to be sing about your point and purpose in life, and sing about your point and purpose in photography. So let's make 2024 the year that you make significant progress in your photography. With over 22 years of photography experience and 16 years of teaching experience, I invite you to take this opportunity to dive deeply into your creativity, to figure some things out about your creativity, and to draw it forward, to bring it out. Every one of us, I am convinced, I know it's true, we are creative. We were created by the Creator. We are creative, and we are able to make things that are unique with our own voice, our own perspective, our own view on the world. That's so exciting to do. So you'll be able to apply these skills that you're going to learn over and over again, and that will help you to continually level up your work. Now, it is risk-free for 7 days. So as you log in, you sign up, you log in, you take a look around, and maybe there's something about it that you're just like, well, it's not exactly what I thought it would be, or whatever the case is. Certainly, I invite you to reach out. Please let me know if there's anything I can do to help you understand what's going on here. But if you're just thinking, nope, it's just not for me, you've got 7 days to kick the tires, take a look, and then let me know, and I will issue the refund. So we've got in total all of those 6 modules. We've got the twice a month live sessions. We've got this super bonus. It's about a $400 value where I'm going to help you, guide you, lead you through the production of these prints. Now, I will print them myself, of course, and I'll ship them to you. But as we take you through that whole process, get these prints back into your hands, and then we wrap it up with a discussion for your prints, where it's purely about your prints. So we have 6 total regular live sessions. Then we're going to have another one, a 7th one, that is the bonus live session I have listed here in May to discuss your prints. Now, that's another thing where you might be thinking, why do I have to wait until May? Here's the thing about creativity. It takes time. There's nothing like a short-term workshop where you're on site with people. I totally get that, and I love that. I love doing that. But this is an opportunity that will allow you to, over time, really focus and really understand. And when we're talking about these ideals, when we're talking about these things of understanding how you want to say what you want to say, or even what it is you want to say, these things do take time. I don't think these things are capable of being figured out as effectively, anyway, in a weekend or in a week worth of workshop. And so by having this extra time, you're giving yourself the time and the room to grow and to mold yourself into this photographer you want to be. And it does take time, though. So while it takes some time, this is, again, the perfect investment for being able to dedicate yourself to a great season ahead, and think of the future seasons too. Everything builds on itself, and this is going to be something where you'll be able to reap the benefits, because you can go back, you can play back the lessons, you can play back the live sessions. You've got it all there for you, and you'll be able to revisit and just hone in, maybe alter possibly a little bit of your approach. However it is that you're going to end up doing it, it's all about you and your photography and your creative journey. So as you scroll down a little further, we've got the FAQ for this course, whether you just want to know, are you the right fit for the course? And there's a little bit of an item there. Is there a Facebook group? Yes, there is a Facebook group that you would be able to join with us. How long do you have access to the course? The nitty-gritty details on those items. What are the print details? The nitty-gritty details on those as well. All of these are here on the page. And then we have the form. And so, of course, just the standard style form. Again, if you've got this coupon code before Cyber Monday, that is November 27, 2023, then you're going to be able to qualify for $50 off. And you just click that button for have a coupon and plug in BF2023, and you're going to be able to have your little bit of $50 off there. So that'll be kind of nice for you. After that, it'll go back to the regular price. The regular price is $699. So we've got about a $400 value in just those prints alone. We've got the live sessions. We've got all of the course material. There's just a boatload of stuff here, and it's all available for $699. So I certainly hope I'll see you in the course. If you need to reach out for any reason, by all means, send me an email, info@brentbergherm.com, and you'll be able to email me directly. And I would love to be able to answer any questions you have about what we're doing here with this Designing Creativity in Photography course. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for being here. Whether you're on the YouTube or in the audio only land, it's amazing to have you here each and every time. And I just really thank you. It's all about learning. It's all about continuing the process of moving forward with these items. And one thing I almost forgot to mention, I'm actually doing quite a few emails to those that are on my email list. I'm taking these items that we just talked about today, and I'm going through them in fairly grave detail. And when it's in the written form, it comes out a little bit differently. I'm really noticing how there's just slightly different thoughts, slightly different ideals coming across in those thoughts. So if you'd like to take advantage of that, I invite you to get on my email list, and I would love for you to be able to take a look at all those emails. I'm going to, in the next one, so if you do it here before the next couple of days, if you do it by Cyber Monday, I guess I probably should say, I'm going to send out another email on Cyber Monday that says, here's the backlog of all those messages and the links that you can have to all those messages that you can just read them right there on the website. And you'd be able to just link right to them and be able to go through these in a slightly different fashion. Again, it's the same ideals that we just talked about here, but since I'm writing them out in long form, it just comes across a little bit better, a little bit differently, maybe is a better way to put it. So if that interests you, by all means, take a look at the notifications link there in your show notes and get signed up, and you'll be able to be on the email list for that. All right, that's it. Thanks again so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Until next time, God bless and happy shooting.